Hello, welcome back. This is Brian Kinsman with Mod 11 Case Study, Everyday Counts, Golden Oak High School. I suppose it's not welcome back for you, just for me. Taking take two. All right, let's quickly look at some of the uh, uh, straight objective facts of the case. Golden Oak High School serves high school age 965 students, diverse range of extracurricular activities, high participation rate, generally normal socioeconomic distribution among families. This is probably in a suburb, as most parents commute hours to the city, which can cause problems later on, as we'll see. Increasing diversity in the neighborhood from Hispanic and Asian additions to the community, and a low turnover rate among staff. We are following Principal Rhodes. It's his first year on the job. Dr. Newman is the district superintendent, who has some different point of views than what I would take, but we'll go over that later. The absentee school counselor, and 5 students of 659 that missed more than 10 days the previous semester. Of that number, we're looking at Karen, Tyrone, Christina, Carl, and John. These events occur at the end of the first semester and at the conclusion of Christmas break, and at the very least, we know it's at least 1944, because the case acknowledges the Supreme Court decision Prince v. Massachusetts, which established the legal doctrine of parens patriae. So, we see Golden Oak is facing an attendance crisis. 68% of the student population has missed more than 10 days just this semester, and in the past, Golden Oak was among the top in attendance. Most of the teachers have been here for over 10 years, so we know that both the high and the low attendance has come under mostly the same staff. Principal Rhodes chooses 5 students upon which to begin his investigation of the school's attendance problems, what role the staff plays in perpetuating or soothing those problems, and how he can use data to address the needs of stakeholders at large. So, the 5 students here, I won't spend too much time on it, but Karen, she was an honors student who is having academic issues that correlate with her attendance issues. Found out she was married just before the attendance issue started, and her parents have in fact put in a request or requested a meeting with the school counselor, but there appears to be no apparent intervention or follow-up, unfortunately, especially with some clear red flags there. Tyrone, a 10th grade student who missed 14 days. This was in 2 chunks, taken by his family both times on, quote, educational excursions. The homeroom teacher in this case used their individual discretion to excuse the absences. Personally, there's got to be a limit to individual discretion, but, maybe you could work something out in the case of educational trip. Christina, a 9th grade student, has missed chunks over 3 weeks for church trips. I only say it so incredulously because the homeroom teacher used, again, their discretion to approve essentially a form letter with a signature, had minimal details. That makes me uncomfortable as a building leader. Who are these people taking our students? Again, she missed exams and grades are suffering severely. And again, the algebra teacher requested a conference with her parents. John has some of the more serious issues as a whole, but at first glance, they don't seem as serious. But John's essentially missing 3 half days a week, 1.5 days a week, which is more than every other student we've looked at today. But John here is a key player on the school football team, our number 1 sport, and he was injured. The physical therapist said that he could continue playing if he did therapy. Therapy is unfortunately only during school hours, so here we are. John needs the therapy to play football. He does not need the therapy to come to class. So there's a lot to look at here, but I want to pay attention that neither the teachers or counselors have addressed any of John's dramatic absences during the first semester. I'm really uncomfortable with the way everything just seems business as usual with John here. I think that there's a lot to unpack Carl, a 10th grade student with a high number of random single absences during the semester. He is in our trade school program, but the absences stacked up to the point where a truant officer made a visit to his home. We see from the Carl's father's responses to the officer that it does not appear that education is highly valued in that household. So let's look at some of the legal and ethical issues I thought were particularly interesting. One, the equal application of district policy. In this case, we've seen instances of teachers using their personal discretion to excuse absences of many varieties and lengths, and some policies seem to be applied less judiciously to notable students, important athletes, as we mentioned. This lack of consistency puts both students and the school at risk, in my opinion. Teachers have signed off on excusal forms of questionable origin that, I don't want to think that it puts the young students at risk, but at the very least, puts them in the care of other adults who we don't understand their qualifications. And this can, eventually this could lead to a liability issue for the school, where just letting students go, but where and how, for how long. Ignorance of district policies and personal responsibilities. Through this case, we saw multiple instances of duties not being fulfilled. The school counselor is never referenced following up with teachers, parents, or administration. And at the very least here, there's a serious breakdown of sharing communication through hierarchical channels. We see this ignorance again in Carl's father. He is not aware of the legal role of the school in the community, and that Carl is still of an age where education is compulsory. So in part 3, we've got a one-sentence synthesis. I'll take a deep breath for it. Over the course of recent years, Golden Oak High School has faced serious problems with declining student attendance rates that have been exacerbated by a breakdown of consistent application of protocol, a school and community culture that does not value strong attendance rates, and the neglected avenues of communication and intervention between teachers, counselors, administration, and other stakeholders. Here, I really think that there's a bit of institutional rot going on in Golden Oak High School. These kinds of problems seem to be bottlenecking because they're not being shared or looked at together. I think they just end up sitting on different people's desks and they can't see the full picture. So we mentioned the commuting of parents earlier. So many commute. You might see the parental engagement at below our desired levels. When you're in the car 3 hours a day, that takes away time from home. The superintendent is confident in the positive intervention of the justice system, something that personally I would attempt to avoid if I could. The counselor, where are they? What overlap is there with students who are at or near chronically absent levels and students in low-income households? If we had access to demographic data from Golden Oaks, I think we could really draw some interesting conclusions. And on that same note, I wondered what the former principal was like. Teachers stay here longer, so most of the teachers have been through both the highs and lows. So if teachers are consistent, where is the change in itself? Or was there a laissez-faire culture that had just been building over time? The AD just needs to maintain a clear vision of whose interests they represent here. Athletic success is good and clearly their job, but student academic success is the number one priority. All right, from this point on, let's look at quickly at some of the potential damages we face here. The reputation of the school being tarnished, that is hard to replace. Slack attendance protocol puts students at risk and the school in potentially liable positions, as we mentioned before. And staff not living up to their responsibilities hurts students academically and potentially themselves professionally. We want students to reach their potential, and we also want school staff to reach their potential and keep their jobs. I think that this is an excellent opportunity for the new principal to put together a questionnaire and really start getting some early perception data on which we're going to build further in the future. So identify our options. I try to find something positive in doing nothing, which I thought is a good way to let problems identify themselves a little bit more prominently, but otherwise not very effective. Dr. Newman's advice here is to closely involve social services in the juvenile court. Is easier on behalf of the principal, in my opinion. It absolves them of some responsibility, puts enforcement in the rules in hands of the justice system. Institute strict new guidelines depending on the power structure. The principal could just, on their own, draft a new system to replace the failing one. This is a very blunt use of administrative power, but could be the most effective in the short term, especially if it stops the bleeding, as it were, of student attendance rates. Involving the stakeholders. This is going to be more long-term centric goal. Building trust through collaborative planning and action. Repairing your internal culture and reputation with stakeholders will be vital to solving the attendance rate issue. Holding forums and planning sessions, though, takes a long time and teachers hate it. So there's some downsides there. Let's look at, like I said, if I were the principal in real life, if I'm in the principal's position, I'd probably think a bit harder about involving the juvenile justice system. But in this case, I can be ethically consistent and say that I would not. Instituting a strict set of guidelines, like we said before, it could be really effective, a short-term dictator, but it could have serious consequences to stakeholder trust if it's blunt or it doesn't work or creates a lot of extra hassle for the staff. All right, whoops. We're looking at evaluating our options here. We want to bring in the wide base of stakeholders for collaborative design. I think that's the way you're going to get people to support a broad vision for continuous school improvement. And, even though Principal Rhodes hasn't had a long time to build a lot of trust and buy-in, and this is a risky plan, if he implements it poorly, it could be chaotic and really undermine him as a leader. But it's so important to stop that bleeding. Like I said, to triage the system, and stop the bleeding, and really get a sense of control over the attendance rate issue. Probably reroute all of the requests to the administrators, take it straight to the top, let them deal with it, and micromanage for a short time during an emergency, and then, roll things back out to the larger group. So the path to implementation will begin with data gathering. I mentioned perception data before. This will let us gauge community interest levels and how many participants we can expect to get involved. Next, a leader should present the proposed plan to small groups of school leaders and gradually expand the circle while taking in stakeholder opinions here. After alerting stakeholders to proposed changes, we mentioned the unilateral control of attendance policy to the administration. And I really think it's important to meet with some of the people you think might be the most resistant to your new changes. Not everyone's going to be on board. You really hope they are. But there's always going to be resistance, especially from people in other power that they've carved out for themselves. But look at the failings and responsibility here are just not acceptable. We looked at Karen, and there was big red flags, and even to the point where her parents requested a meeting that was never followed up on. That could have been dangerous for Karen. Who knows? At the very least, it's serious. It needs to be re-examined. Hopefully, the counselors are open to retraining and available to consult on these new policies. This strategy will likely to make a semester or two, but if you don't see results within the first year, I would be more open to considering Plan B to bring in the truancy officers to have them play a larger role in policy enforcement and investigation while we review new options. I think that at the very least, we have built up our trust with the community and stakeholders at large. Thank you very much.